Welcome to week 8 of this session, the fall of 2018 of Ironmen. We're going to have a great time this week looking at two really important questions. I know about you, but first impressions are significant, and what we think about people and how we come to those conclusions really matter. Jesus asked his disciples towards the end of his earthly ministry two very significant questions. One was, what was the impression that other people had of him? Who did others say that he was? But primarily, most importantly, the most formative question was, who did they say he was, based on their experience of him and things that they did with him, things that they heard him teach and do, and saw him move and how he moved in the midst of the crowds. So we're going to spend some time this week talking about those two great questions. Who do others say that he is, and who do you say that he is? I can't think of two more important questions to form our lives around. Hey, tonight I'm very much looking forward to what we're going to do. I'd like to say that tonight we're going to take a look at what I would think is probably life's most impacting question. We have been talking about through this journey, right? That Jesus, when he came and then when he left, he built a team, right? You guys remember that, right? And they have names, and they start with a D. They're called the disciples. That's a Bible term. Another term you could use would be followers or believers, students of. Those would all be other words that would be reciprocal for this one disciple, all right? We spent time talking about how did Jesus actually do what he did to get this team ready to take over so we can learn, and how do we do that same kind of thing with our lives? Because I've tried to encourage you that none of us in this room is here just for us. None of us knows God just for us. And none of us is doing what we're doing just for us. We don't exist just for us. So we have influence whether we know it or not. And so we might as well know it and lean into it. And so we've looked at some of the ways that this master teacher, this former of hearts, was doing that. And that what he was really trying to do wasn't just put information in their heads, though he did that. He was really trying to captivate their hearts towards a greater allegiance. And then he both impacted their heads and their hearts, but if he didn't have their hearts, just having their heads wasn't going to work. And this process isn't linear. It's not that we just teach people A plus B plus C equals D. That's not the way life works, is it? Sometimes with people, you add A plus B and you get Q. We're just crazy sometimes, aren't we? And so Jesus used experiences. He used metaphor. He used story. He did direct teaching. He took them on excursions. He asked a ton of questions. And tonight we're going to take a look at a couple. And I believe this, that these are questions that leave no stone unturned, and people live in response to these questions, whether they know it or not. And we're going to unpack that a little bit tonight, all right? But before we do, I'd like to ask you guys, how much do you believe first impressions matter in terms of how we treat and value other people? I think it's up there. There you go. How much do you guys feel first impressions matter? Do they matter? Yes. They do, don't they? Huh? I mean, how do they matter in terms of how we treat people or how we value people? Any thoughts about that? Anybody daring enough to jump in on that one? Yeah, thank you. Alex, first impression? Great.
First impression that someone perceives of you either is your physical features, how you articulate,
okay,
how you project yourself in a matter of any circumstances,
yeah,
and how you handle a problem that is given to you.
All right.
Work, socially, economically, or with family.
All right, so we're all saying they're important, right? And let's just be really honest. If you're really honest, have you ever maybe looked at a person and based on your first impression, which you almost do subconsciously, you know that, right? It almost stirs up in some way how you value them or treat them. Or if you have two people and you realize you're more, it's not just, you know they're both human beings, but you probably prefer to be with one versus another. And that's based on what? Impression. But what's it rooted in? what do we typically base these things on? Alex said something like external features. What would be some others? Yeah.
On a psychological construct that we have in our heads.
Say that again?
Psychological construct that we have in our heads.
That you have in your head already. Doug, so you're saying you already have something in your head that when you look at Dennis, what's in your head determines what you think of him. It's not just him. That's good. That's good.
Life experiences.
Life experience. Say a little bit more about that, Steve.
Every time my grandchildren see me in my white coat or my stethoscope, they start crying.
They start crying. Really? Why?
Because they think they're going to get a shot.
Yeah. So Steve's a doctor, so every time, so Steve is trying to traumatize his grandchildren. So he dresses up every chance he gets as a doctor and goes over there with a stethoscope, and they're freaking out all the time.
Well, I mean, the point is, obviously, if you've had an experience, then the next time you're placed in a position where it reminds you of that experience, it creates an impression.
Creates an impression. Good. Yeah, Chris?
I'd say our first impression is already sometimes predetermined or undermined because of what society already identifies somebody as. So I might meet you and you're a middle-aged white man. What does society tell us about? Like, is there already a prejudice of who you are because of what you're...
So you subconsciously learned something from culture about somebody like me, and when you see me, it just kind of gets transferred. By the way, you're very kind to call me middle-aged, brother. I really, really appreciate that. I am way past middle-aged, baby. If I double this, I might be the oldest man in the world one day. That's going to be great. You're very kind. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. No, that makes a lot of sense. How about just one or two more? This is really good. This is going to, yeah, Bill, and then we'll come over to Mark.
For Christians, I agree with everything you said, but for Christians, it's really based in sin because we're asked not to judge. We're asked not to let the world make these predeterminations to carry over. We're asked to love our neighbor like we love ourselves. So if we're doing any of that stuff, I believe some of it is subconscious. We should be guarding against that.
We should be.
The world.
Now, let me push back for a minute. Does it mean that every first impression is negative? Or you're against the person? It could be some things are positive, right? Now, if we're coming up negative, we hope we'd have enough self-thing to say, hey, look, you really don't know that person's story. Now, here's the deal. Most of the time when you have an impression, do you think you're right or wrong?
Wrong. I think you're right.
I think most people probably think you're right. I mean, isn't that interesting? Now, that's where the arrogance comes in, right? Like, you don't know anybody. You don't know their story. But somehow, you're judge and jury of their reality without maybe even knowing their name. Maybe you've never even been introduced to them. Or maybe you just heard some facts about them, and you come up with a conclusion about them. People doing this right now in the political arena, like constantly. We're lobbing grenades like this is part of the attention of our country right now. Mark, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say we have I know we're all guilty of such a preconceived notion about people.
Right.
And we're so focused on the outward appearance instead of looking at a person's heart. Immediately we start judging them by how they look or how they dress, what their face looks like, or if they're, so.
Yeah. So we do a lot of what first part, it's interesting. Research shows that we do, unfortunately, initially judge a book by its cover. And a lot of times it's more nonverbal than verbal cues. And they say that it happens almost instinctively within 7 to 30 seconds. Now, it can be changed, but it takes a humility and a willingness to enter in and an openness to say, just because I have an impression doesn't mean it's... And to be able to say, if I'm treating this person this way, I don't know if I'd want somebody treating me that way. Because people have them about us too, right? And sometimes our ideas about things can hold us back. Illustration. A number of years ago, about 7 or 8 years ago, my son Josh got married, and real quickly, my brother-in-law David is just this great guy, and he's really come to faith, and his wife Sue is this dear, dear woman. I love her to death. And she is Jewish by background, not real strict in that faith, but certainly was brought up to a certain level. And David goes to a congregational church. They have an interfaith marriage. And obviously they came to our son's wedding, Josh's wedding. And at one point in the ceremony, I was privileged, I had a chance to do Josh's wedding. We actually had a piece of it from a Hebrew wedding ceremony. It's called the it's a ceremony of two cups, the cup of joy and the cup of sorrow. And I don't have the chance to go into it right now, but anyway, we did that. And after the wedding and the reception, we were driving home, and Sue was in the car with me and my wife and a couple other folks, and she was just commenting on how much the time with Josh, my son, and his friends meant to her, just seeing the power of their friendship and this part in the ceremony, and I said, well, Sue, it's intriguing to me because this really comes from your people. And we got into this conversation about Josh's friendships was because of the person of Jesus. Like, we've talked about this before, but this was interesting. She goes, I just never felt that was a possibility for me. Meaning that I could even entertain thoughts about him. And I said, well, why not? This is interesting. She said, well, number one, I'm not conservative. What? She's not conservative. She's not a Republican. No. I'm telling you. We can say, what do we think that has to do with it?
Conservative in her faith.
No, she's not conservative in her faith, but she's also not conservative in her politics. Her perception was, whether we like it or not, see, if we don't understand, we can't yell at the world for what they think of us. We need to understand it. It doesn't do anything to disagree with it. You got to understand it. You're not going to be able to connect if you can't appreciate. So this is where we go with this. I go, well, I say, oh, so what? She goes, well, I just feel like there's things that probably I believe that, see, in her mind, quote, Christians don't believe, that she's been exposed to. And I said, well, I just need you to know that not every believer I know is a Republican. You just need to know that. Like, if you've thought that up to this point, you can drop that one. I don't even know that in fact, I will tell you, I don't, I'm certainly more conservative politically, and this is being recorded, so you can here am I, right? But I don't buy the whole Republican ticket thing. I don't think they're right on every single issue. And I don't think the Democrats are wrong on every single issue. What if we ask this question, what causes people to flourish? And that was our goal. Because I think that's what God created us to do, and how do we best do that? And so we got into this conversation. I said, well, Sue, just so you know this, I said, like, this one, Jesus, like, I don't follow a Christian. We're driving down 83. I go, like, I follow your guy. Like, he was a Jewish rabbi. And I said, she goes, well, yeah. I go, so Sue, really, in some ways, you ought to know a little more about this than I do. And I said, it's okay if you don't buy it. I said, what hurts me is you've thrown it out before you know anything about it. You said no to something for all the wrong reasons instead of taking a look at it and then saying no, at least because you know, right? So I recommend this book, Our Father Abraham, The Jewish Roots of the Christian Faith. And I said, man, I'd love for you to just take a look at it. But I said, I just want you to know that this Jesus' arms are wide and open. And I just want you, he loves you. And everything that you experience this weekend is him. I understand why you maybe don't want to know Christianity, because maybe whatever you run into, I get it. But I just want to tell you that Jesus isn't all of that. Do you see where first impressions come? Here's what I know. A wrong introduction leads to a wrong conclusion every single time. If I go, I want to introduce you guys to my friend Mike. Mike here, here I tell you about Mike. Mike is, he's a case. Mike has really been through it. He has every now and then he kind of gets crazy. And he needs a group like us, and he doesn't have many friends. So if you guys would just kind of be nice to Mike, be really good, okay? Because he's one of the loneliest guys I've ever met in my life. So when Mike comes in, I want to introduce him to you. And then what if Mike comes in and I say, hey guys, here's Mike. And you guys go like, oh, Mike. You guys would have, like, is that the dude? Like, you'd have these impressions. But if I said, hey guys, just a minute, this guy, my friend Mike's going to come, and Mike happens to be one of the most high-quality human beings that I've ever met in my life. He's got one of the biggest hearts of anyone I've met. He deeply cares and loves his family and cares for his family. In fact, he recently called me because there's this guy that he really cares about that he's reaching out to, and he wanted to know if I had a resource that he could use with him. And he cared enough a while ago to call me and ask me if I knew somebody he could meet with to help with an issue that was going on in his realm of his life. And he's just a man that really wants to get the most out of this thing. So it's my honor and privilege to introduce to you Mike. Which introduction do you think Mike likes best? Huh? The second one, right? And the second one is Mike. As best I know Mike. But see, a right conclusion leads to a better introduction every time too. So during table talk, I'd love you to think about this. What do you often hear people saying about this person of Jesus, if anything? I mean, where do their ideas seem to come from? And then kind of turn it a little bit and ask yourself this question. What were some of your first impressions of this one named Jesus Christ? And where did they come from? And how, if they have, how have they changed over time? And what has actually contributed to those changes? Enjoy this time together around your tables. All right, fellas. Hey, let's do this. Let's have some fun. I want to talk about these questions for a little bit, but I also like to encourage you to turn, if you've got your scripture, to Matthew chapter 16, or if you're using your phones, that would be, if you're using your phones, that's on page 712. Oh, see, I got you, didn't I, Steve? Okay, here we go. Hey, I'd love to just hear when... Matthew chapter 16. When you guys think about just the culture at large, or maybe your experience, maybe a last dialogue you had with somebody around this, when you just think, what do you hear people saying about the person of Jesus, if it's even an issue for them, it's intriguing. People think, I would say it's safe to say we live in a post-quote Christian world now. It's amazing. It's interesting through the years in young life, you get a little beat on the culture by just being with teenagers and seeing how much they know and what some of their impressions are of this person of Jesus. And with each year that goes by, it's intriguing. More and more young people know less and less and less and less. I mean, it's crazy what they don't know and what they have picked up somehow along the way, taking the place of what they actually don't know. It's like there's a lot of freight to work through. So it's almost better they know nothing than some of the stuff they know. But anybody hearing anything just in general? It'd be fun to kind of talk about that before we kind of get a little more personal. Anybody? Yeah, thank you, Chris. Just anything.
I find that people want to know what happened to you that you need Jesus.
Which what?
What happened to you?
What happened to Jesus?
No, what happened to you that you need Jesus?
Or what happened to you that you needed Him? Yeah, like what is it about this Jesus that's so important, right? That we actually need Him.
The Jesus thing.
Yeah, it's the Jesus thing. I'm not even trying to write that, but you guys heard that, so that's good. No, I mean that's true. Why do you need Him? Like, is He needed? Like, why do you need Him? It's interesting. The first thing we go to, we're not going to get lost here now, but first thing we try to convince people then is how bad they are, so they need Him. What if we didn't go there? What if we went before there? What if we didn't start the story with the fall? The story really doesn't start in Genesis 3. You guys know that, right? It starts in creation. So why do we really need Him? Say, well, here's the deal. You don't need Him if you don't want to, but if you really want to understand life, it was kind of His idea. Let me put it to you. Let me ask you another question. Do you ever feel like there's certain things in life just aren't the way they ought to be? And that person's probably, if they're sane, are going to say what? Yes. That's why you need to take a look at Jesus. Because He had some ideas about how it ought to be. And then I just see where they go from there. But see, maybe you don't start with trying to convince somebody how bad they are. And how sinful they are, because that's why they need Jesus. You'll get there if the conversation stays long enough. And here's what I know. We're terrible at convicting people of this stuff. The Spirit of God is wonderful at it. And when you're pressing, I think it's time to pull off and just let the Lord do what the Lord does. I'm telling you, nobody had to make me come to Jesus. When I saw the truth in reality, I wanted to come to Jesus. And I don't think I'm the only one in this room. How about some others? This is good. Yeah.
in Sunday school, I always remember that.
Because you went to Sunday school.
Well, that's true.
No, that's good. Okay, that's important. Okay, good.
But he was in the little picture book. He was always a mild and meek man.
Yeah.
With the little kids and the
Yeah.
lamb in his lap.
What color was he? What skin color?
It was Swedish.
No, what? Yeah. What skin color did he have, though? I mean, I'm not being funny. Like the picture you had of Jesus in the picture, was he white? Yeah, he was white. Hey, this is great. Gary, Wayne, did you guys have any pictures of Jesus when you guys were at church?
Absolutely.
What color was he?
I was Catholic school. It was always white.
Always white. Did you brothers ever think something was wrong with that picture? No, I'm not trying to be funny. No.
I just assumed that's what it was.
You assumed it was what? Now here's what, this is awesome. Because Jesus really wasn't raised in Kansas. See, Jesus was a first century Middle Easterner and he did have dark skin. This thing with him being white, it ain't it. It's much more dark skin than white skin. So see, we need to, I'm sorry you guys got lied to, man. But this is my point. We interpret Jesus through our own what? And precondition. What if he's actually more than that? And do you think for 3 years he was trying to help these young followers say, I'm more than what you think I am. I know you got some ideas, but today we're going to blow your circuits one more time. Right? I mean, this is interesting, isn't it? How we get our stuff and we put it on him. And I mean, I have a friend who has all these pictures. He's got a soccer Jesus. He's got a Santa Claus Jesus. I mean, all these images. It's crazy the first impressions that people have. And knocking that stuff out of the way to say, whoa, 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 whoa. Can we just give you a right introduction? Because some of this stuff you don't want to know him and don't even know why you don't want to know him. It's almost just subconscious. I mean, I think some people's introduction to Jesus is his goal for following him. He just wants you to not do bad stuff. He just wants you to keep you out of trouble. And that's like, he really wants you to keep you out of bed with some woman. Don't be drinking. And keep the language to a minimum, please. And at some point, it's like, really? Is that the best we can do? Is that really what it's about? Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I always thought of like the judge and the jury. It's like you're either going to heaven or not, and he has these 10 commandments.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. Do you see, like, this is, my daughter just sent me this quote tonight, if I can think of it. She goes, Dad, what do you think of this? Fear is simply a lie with the air being taken out of it. You know, you think of fear as just something that God is trying to just move us. And I'll get the exactness of that quote because I don't want to misquote, but I think that was right. But you think of how many times the things we hear and we fear. And how do we deflate these things? With the truth, right? So here comes Jesus, Matthew 16. Let's take a look real quick. This is big. I actually am certain of this, gentlemen, and you guys can play it however you want, but I'm willing to say this, that I think people either live their lives in response to the Lord or basically on their own. And Jesus was a master at inviting people to their truest selves. People have answered this question whether they know it or not. And if they're disinterested, they've kind of answered it because it's just maybe by what they don't know. So here's Jesus. He comes on Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. This is well into Jesus' ministry after 2 years, as best we can tell. It says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, now this is important. I should have had a picture of this, but I'd been there. Caesarea Philippi was an intriguing place. It's a place where people worshiped numerous gods, false idols. And maybe a year ago, I had a picture of one, and one of the idol Pan, that literally was spelled P-A-N, was built into the mountainside. And there's a rock there that you can stand on, that we had a chance to stand on, and you can look behind you, like right up there, and you can see where the imprint of this false god Pan was. Now, interestingly, if you look when you're standing on this rock, where the tourists stand, down to your right, there's this huge hole. And it was known as the gates of hell. Literally. So when Jesus says these things, they have a context. So here's Jesus in a place where they worship multi-false gods. He takes people there. His disciples are with him. He's been with them for over 2 years. And then he asks an interesting question. You think, why do you ask this question here? Well, you ask it here because here is a place of many false gods being worshipped. And he's trying to say, I'm the real deal in the midst of a world with a lot of false deals. Isn't that awesome? So he goes, look, who do people say the Son of Man is? That was sort of Jesus' undercover, covert name taken from Daniel about the Messiah. They replied, some say John the Baptist. Now, that's pretty good company. Just wrong. Others say Elijah, one of the great prophets, right? Still others, Jeremiah, or one of the other prophets. He says, man, that's like, these guys are to be admired, but they're not to be worshipped. So who do other people say I am? I mean, that's a great question, isn't it? I think one of the greatest questions we could ever ask a person when you get close enough to say, hey, who do you think Jesus is? And then just listen. Say, where'd you get your information? Like if I were to say, Mike isn't who I want Mike to be. Mike is actually what? Mike is actually who he is. And Mike has a privilege of self-declaring. But here's what it's going to take for me to really know Mike. What is it going to take for me to really know who Mike is? I have to get to know him. Right? And getting to know him means that we have to have a what? A relationship, which demands an encounter. See, God is forcing the encounter in the person of Jesus Christ. He doesn't want us to not know who He is. He really wants us to know who He is. So He forces the encounter, and He says, who do people say I am? They give a great answer, just the wrong one. And then He says, but what about you? He asks, who do you say I am? That's a big question. I would even say this. Don't think because if you sit here today and know Jesus that you've already answered that question. So let me ask you this. If this represents all the knowledge, so to speak, that one can have of Jesus, and I said, hey, Frank, come on up here, man, take the pen. Why don't you just mark off how much you think you know about Jesus? How much you think it would be? Dot. What if we put all of our knowledge of Jesus together? How much you think? See, like you think you know Him until He does something that kind of blows your circuits, right? Like you know Him until He touches a dead boy's casket, which no rabbi would ever do. You think you know Him until a woman comes into a room full of Pharisees and religious teachers who no one would ever come to, and she literally weeps on Jesus' feet, and He lets her take her hair down, which in that society would have been seen as something very sensual, and this woman was seen before she came in the room in Luke 7 as being somewhat loose already, and He allows her to do this, quote, sensual thing, take her hair down, and wipe His feet with her hair. You know Him till He does that, right? You know Him till He goes into a temple twice, once in the beginning of John and once at the end, and flips over chairs because people are doing something to God's temple and making a mockery of what that place is supposed to be, and He won't let it be. Do you see what I'm trying to say? There is so much more to this Jesus. And so I pray for me and for you, for all of us men, that we never stop hearing Jesus say to us, hey Brian, who do you say I am? Mike, who do you say I am? Bob, who? Alex, who do you say I am? Now, Peter got it right and he got it wrong, didn't he? You ever think you can get it right and wrong at the same time? He got it right wrong. He goes, well, you're what? You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus affirms it. High five. Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter. And on this rock, I'm going to build my church. And then he points, and the gates of hell are not going to prevail against it. Because there aren't many gods. There's one God. And what I'm doing, see, 30,000-foot view, I'm taking history, and the gates of hell, earthbound, are not going to stop me taking this one across the end zone. We're going to score. We're scoring. Peter's just undone. And then, though, right after he says this, he warned his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. There's a reason for that, because his time had not yet come. It says, but from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, suffer many things at the hands, and you can imagine Peter hearing this, at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, that he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life. No. Whoa, Jesus, like, who do people say you are? You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And you say we're going to go back to Jerusalem to the chief priests and to the elders, and you're going back to the guys that don't like you very much, and then they're going to do what to you? Like, when I told you who you were, what I meant that you were is that you were a military Messiah, that you were actually going to change some things around here, and that's who you are. He goes, no, that's not who I am. And then he goes, get behind me, Satan. See, this is what makes Jesus just so astounding. I pray that we will never get used to Jesus Christ. In fact, Jim Rayburn, who started Young Life, said it this way. I mentioned this to you guys once before. He said that Jesus Christ is the only person that you can talk about without any fear of exaggeration. Isn't that awesome? He's the only person you can talk about without any fear of exaggeration. And so he blows the circuits of the religious leaders by the kind of people he loved. He blew the minds of the common people by the things that he did. If we see this vision of this future thing that he's going to do to rescue humanity. Because here's what we understand. The closer we get to Jesus Christ as we understand this, is that he is not just who anybody thinks he is. He is who he is. And it takes an encounter to really know who he is. And so I think Jesus, if he's going to build his team, he keeps asking them the question, who do you say I am? Who do you say I am? They're answering this every day, and now he finally gives them a chance to declare it. Story's not over yet. They're going to declare it again when they see him get arrested. They're going to declare it again when he rises again from the dead. They keep answering this question, me too. Let me ask you this. Do you guys think you've had the last heartache in your life? Do you ever think you've had your last disillusionment with God? Do you think you've had the last thing happen to your life that's going to make you look up to heaven and go, hey, God, what's that about? At that point, I think it's another way of Jesus saying, who do you say I am? So you think that because this didn't go the way you wanted it and there's heartache, that somehow I'm not who I am, and you get to decide based on your circumstances who I am. People do this all the time. And then they go, and I'm out, God. We're going to talk about this next week. And I'm out. I'm out because what I wanted, you didn't give me. I'm out because that pain was more than I thought I signed up for. In fact, I thought if I knew you, that wouldn't happen. And so what God says, you want me to tell you what I say you are? And here's what I think he'd say. You're more than you know. You're my son, whom I love. And you're broken and you're lost without me. And that's why I came to get you. And there's more going on than you know. There's one Savior of the world, and it's me. And so there's some part of this question when he says, who do you say I am? That we can say, Lord, I'm only going to tell you what I know, but there's so much I don't know. So you tell me how much you know about this one. In the beginning was the Logos, or the Word, or the ultimate reality. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Nothing came into being apart from him. And then the scriptures say later that that very Word that created the whole world became flesh and dwelt among us. And then Paul says in Colossians 1 that this one Jesus is actually the visible expression of the invisible God. You don't have to prove this to people and say, do you want to know what God's like? Most people go, if he exists, sure. Go, have you ever thought about looking at the person of Jesus? Jesus is the visible expression of the invisible God. By him all things are created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. Everything's been created through him and for him. And here's what I know. If you're willing to encounter him, I think you're going to either find out that he's the real deal or he's nothing. But don't be afraid of the introduction, because you might just find out that he's way more than we knew. And I just think if we could understand this, guys, we worship, I mean this in a beautiful way, a wild Savior. I mean, you start being able to box him in and make it all neat and everything's pretty. I'm not being disrespectful here. I'm saying as I read these scriptures, he goes from being the Messiah, the Son of the living God, to someone that's going to die on a cross. That's a different agenda. See, Peter had one idea, and then life happens. I think we all do. Betsy and I did too, and we lost a son, and we almost lost a daughter. You guys have your own stories of loss. I'm not the only one sitting in this room. But at some point, you're still confronted with him, aren't we? And is he big enough to embrace all of that and what we bring to him in it? In this world, Jesus, this same Jesus said, hey, look, you're going to have trouble. Like, you're going to have trouble. But I've overcome the world. You're going to have trouble. This is what I love. He's a realist. So these are profound truths. And I think every day beckons me and you to keep asking this question, answering it. Who do you say I am? Because I think it'll make us better at being better translators of this Jesus to other people that maybe have no real view, a stunted view, an inaccurate view, and so we're not just lobbing information at them. Maybe we're doing better, having better questions. All right? Alex, is it a short one? Because I got to play a tape.
It's 16:20.
Yeah.
How did Jesus tell the disciples not to tell anybody who he was?
Yes.
I don't understand that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that goes on, but part of the reason is there was a lot of tension that was getting stirred up at that time with Jesus, and there wasn't any need to create more consternation and tension in terms of when he needed to do what he needed to do. So there were even times where Jesus would slip out of a crowd. I don't know how he did it. I'd love, he probably never got caught at hide and seek, but because it just wasn't, we got to get some other stuff done, so he wasn't going to let the people he was with determine his agenda at that point in time. So that's probably the easiest way I think that we could answer that question at that point in time. Yeah. Thank you. Hey, I want to play a clip from you guys. Some of you may or may not have heard this. I don't know, but I have heard this 4 or 5 times, and it's only 3 minutes of something that lasts over an hour. And I don't know how anybody can preach like this, but it's by a guy named Dr. S.M. Lockridge. If you're looking, Dr. S.M. Lockridge, you can YouTube it. But one of the reasons I want you to see this is to just begin again to be captivated by the wonder. When Jesus said, who do men say I am? We come up with answers, right? But then when you say, but who do you say I am? That's a different answer. I can't get, Jesus didn't say, okay, we'll just go with the first question. Who do people say I am? Okay, wrong. Good. Put me in good allegiance, good company, but you're all wrong. I'm the Messiah. Let's end there. No, he forces it. I am. But I want to know, who are you? Who do you say I am? Because that means you got to do something with me. And every human being is going to have to answer this question. Every human being right now, I think, has answered it whether they know it or not. Even by what they don't know. Well, he's nothing to me, so I'm going to live my life on my own. Okay, you've kind of answered the question, but let's reintroduce you to maybe somebody you truly do want to know because you're made by him. Real quickly, a number of years ago, we used to take kids down to King's Dominion. I'll never forget this. There would be 1,000 and some kids. Joel, I don't remember if you were ever a part of this, but we used to take them there for these King's Dominion days. Did you ever take kids down there? No. But we'd have this big young life club at the end of the day with 1,000 kids. And I'll never forget this. This one guy that played for the Redskins at one point, a guy named Perry Brooks. Somehow somebody talked Perry into giving a talk to these 1,000 kids. Well, Perry was a great guy, and he knew the Lord, but I'm not sure he knew what he was getting into. So I'm kind of sitting there, and I'm looking at Perry from a distance. I mean, he didn't look that big, man. I don't know how he'd be a defensive lineman. So Perry gives this talk, and it was like 15 minutes shorter than it needed to be. And I'm the MC, and I realized, oh my gosh, I got to give up. Got to get up and somehow go up in front of 1,000 people and somehow not make Perry look bad, that he didn't really do what we needed him to do. And I got to kind of re-give a talk that he should have given without him knowing I'm doing it. I don't know how we're going to do this, Lord, but I just knew this, that when I was in the back of the room, Perry didn't look that big. And with every step I got, that dude get bigger and bigger and bigger, man. And I got next to him. This guy's like 6'8" and 300 pounds. This guy was a giant. My point is, I think when people look at Jesus from a distance, they go, nah, no big deal. No big deal, not that big a deal. So are you willing to get a little closer? Why not? Well, I don't want to be religious. He wasn't religious. What do you mean? Well, you tell me one thing when he was religious. He was accused of a lot of things. That was never one of them. In fact, he was accused of being a friend of drunkards. Okay, well, I'm doing some crazy stuff. You know, guys that did crazy stuff all the time. In fact, 2 of his disciples were known as the sons of thunder. How about that one? Like, some of his guys were tax collectors. In fact, he let a lady who was immoral touch him. Okay, well, you know, I really don't. And you say, well, what you really don't want to do is maybe find out who you are. Because, see, it might just shake everything up. See, I think what you really don't want to do, maybe you don't really want to learn how to live. Because that's what he wants to teach you. Maybe you don't really want to come alive, and that's what he wants you to do. So I want to play this. Listen to this brother talk about Jesus, man. And just let it impact you, okay? This is crazy. Enjoy this.
The Bible says, my king is the king of the Jews. He's a king of Israel. He's a king of righteousness. He's the king of the ages. He's the king of heaven. He's the king of glory. He's the king of kings. And he's the Lord of lords. That's my king. I wonder, do you know him? My king is a sovereign king. No means of measure can define his limitless love. He's enduringly strong. He's entirely sincere. He's eternally steadfast. He's immortally graceful. He's imperially powerful. He's impartially merciful. Do you know him? He's the greatest phenomenon that has ever crossed the horizon of this world. He's God's Son. He's a sinner's Savior. He's the centerpiece of civilization. He's unparalleled. He's unprecedented. He is the loftiest idea in literature. He's the highest personality in philosophy. He's the fundamental doctrine of true theology. He's the only one qualified to be an all-sufficient Savior. I wonder if you know him today. He supplies strength for the weak. He's available for the tempted and the tried. He sympathizes and he saves. He strengthens and sustains. He guards and he guides. He heals the sick. He cleanses the lepers. He forgives sinners. He discharges debtors. He delivers the captive. He defends the feeble. He blesses the young. He serves the unfortunate. He regards the aged. He rewards the diligent. And he beautifies the meek. I wonder if you know him. He's the key to knowledge. He's the wellspring of wisdom. He's the doorway of deliverance. He's the pathway of peace. He's the roadway of righteousness. He's the highway of holiness. He's the gateway of glory. Do you know him? Well, his light is matchless. His goodness is limitless. His mercy is everlasting. His love never changes. His word is enough. His grace is sufficient. His reign is righteous. And his yoke is easy. And his burden is light. I wish I could describe him to you. He's indescribable. He's incomprehensible. He's invincible. He's irresistible. Well, you can't get him out of your mind. You can't get him off of your hand. You can't outlive him, and you can't live without him. Well, the Pharisees couldn't stand him, but they found out they couldn't stop him. Pilate couldn't find any fault in him. Herod couldn't kill him. Death couldn't handle him, and the grave couldn't hold him. Yeah! That's my king. That's my king.
What are you thinking after you hear that? You know what I'm thinking? First time I heard it, I didn't know if I knew the Lord. I thought like I knew this little white Jesus in some picture. Because I said, you know, if he's even half of that, my life should be a little different than it is. Just how I see people, how I see myself, how I pray. And it wasn't guilt. It was just like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy. And yet, think of this as God. He literally did come as a baby. And he grew up. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And he was crazy about us. And he demonstrated his own love for us. And yet while we were yet sinners, Christ came after us so we could be a part of the team to help other people know who he is. What an incredible gift. So I'm just saying, if this is kind of the view that people have of Jesus, if we could get them to this, that's better. If we could get them to this, that would really be good. But we got to be this to get other people to this, right? Right? So let's just do this. Let's just take a minute. I mean, what are you guys thinking right now? What's just kind of going through your heart right now? Anybody? Just a word, a phrase?
Not worthy.
Not worthy. In a good way, not worthy? Yeah.
Need to learn more.
Need to learn more. Amen. Feel provoked in a good way? Anything. It's good to hear from each other. Is what you're thinking, feeling. Yeah, Mark?
Challenge to step out of my comfort zone.
Challenge to step out of your comfort zone?
Too small. My picture of it, way too small.
Yeah, texture, just a little too small.
I wish I could love him and worship him more.
Yeah. Yeah, more heart. What's that?
Motivated to do better and be better.
Just want to be motivated to do better, be better.
No box. No box.
No box. No box. Isn't that great? You can literally say to people that like to break rules, if they're those kind of people you're around, and say, you know what, Jesus was a rule breaker. And what? Yeah. He broke religious rules. He broke gender rules. He broke religious rules. He broke social rules. Just read John 4. He breaks all of them right there with the Samaritan woman in one passage.
Then he died for us in his blood.
Yeah.
To get rid of our sins.
Yeah. Ponder it. This is what I'm saying. For me too, thank you, Bob. Like, I'm just kind of staggered. And this is the second go-round. Like, I had a chance to think about this last Thursday with some guys, all of the other guys. And I'm like, man, it just made me consider, Lord, forgive me for I made you too small. And yet you prayed for us. Forgive them, Lord, because they don't know what they're doing.
I think Corey hit the nail on the head this weekend when he said he's our secret weapon.
Yeah, he's our secret weapon. I just am saying, in our own journey with the Lord, you guys, collectively, he's not just your Savior, Bob, as an example. He's ours, and he's yours. Kermit, it's not just yours. He's yours, and he's ours. Like, we're a team. Do you see this? And one of the things we need to do is keep each other learning and thinking better, bigger, more true thoughts of this one that we follow. And I think when we do, then we have more courage collectively. You know, when we see brothers who get it a little more in step, I don't want to necessarily be that way. I want to know the Christ who gives Steve that kind of courage. Because then it means he gives that to me. And we're going to talk more about this next week. You guys can be encouraged. But this is really beautiful, who we follow, you guys. And I just, again, I think that Jesus was constantly winning the hearts, the minds, the internal energy of his team so that they were motivated by something much deeper than something just methodology. It's something they couldn't get away. He said, I can't get him out of my head. I mean, once you taste him, you can't really go anywhere else. because you'll leave him for a while, but then you're going to come back going, okay, I did that again, I'm right back where I ought to be. Try that again. That was great for a week. I don't know why I thought that was going to work for 6 months. Here I am again, trying myself again. Well, let's pray. Can we do that? Can we? Lord Jesus, I want to thank you that you are more grand and more magnificent and more dangerous and more inviting and more challenging than I know I have allowed you to be in my own mind. And Lord, I want to grow. I want to let you self-declare and tell me who you are and not let me tell you who you are. And I pray that for my brothers in this room, Lord, that we might have such an encounter with you that we, like Peter, could say, you are the Messiah, but you're your own Messiah. You're not just what we want you to be, Lord. And I thank you that you're not. I thank you that you see people we miss, people that we have the wrong first impressions of, that you see what we don't see, but we want to see what you see. So, Lord, have your way with us. And I pray that we would get up every day, starting tomorrow, and know what a privilege it is that we know you. But Lord, there's so much we don't know yet. And there's so much more we have to discover. So I pray that our knowing would be marked by humility. And to you be the glory, Lord. Use us, and might our greatest, Lord, line be when people ask us who we are, that we could say, it is a joy to say that I'm a follower of Jesus. We love you, Lord. Thank you, though, that you love us. To you be the glory. And all God's people said, Amen. Hey, let's stand and do our verses before we clean up here. And God willing, we'll be back next week. Come and follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. Wow. And the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. All right, guys, God bless you. We'll see you soon. So for next week, week 9, here's what I'd love you to think about. Have you ever considered a time in your life where you had every intention when you started something of finishing it, but you actually didn't? Something got in the way, or maybe your attitude changed, or something unforeseen came into the picture. Next week, we're going to spend some time talking about how good intentions don't always get us to the finish line. Life has a way of bringing interruptions, heartaches, worries, concerns that can take us off course. And the truth is, throughout our lives, all of us are going to have an opportunity to get off the faith train. And so next week, we're going to take a look at these unique people called the disciples and some of the deepening invitations that Jesus gave them as they went along their 3-year journey with him. And how could it be that towards the very end of that journey, they actually didn't show up very well until he reinvigorated his call?